So, my fellow Limbros, today I want to quickly cover some additional tips, tricks, and weird enemy interactions you should be aware of when utilizing the Rift Magician. If you missed the last video, please stop for a moment and go check it out, as basically everything today is going to be weird enemy interactions, things you'll basically stop using once you get better mods, or just niche tricks in general. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is dancing around your cataclysms. Out of the cataclysm tricks I'm going to show you today, this is probably the most useful technique, but once you get your survivability mod set up, you'll probably stop using it for more than 1 or 2 kills at a time. Basically, cataclysms work a bit like the opposite of nullifier bubbles, in that crossing the cataclysm brings you into or out of the void mid-animation. What this means is you can do something similar to how you handle nullifiers. By simply aiming before you step across the cataclysm's edge, you can have the perfect shot lined up and ready to fire with significantly less risk than normal. Just step over, fire, and quickly step or slide back in. This works quite well with any burst weapons, whether we're talking snipers, shotguns, or even explosives, and is a pretty decent way to keep yourself alive before you gain access to Lifestrike, Quick Thinking, and the other mods that help with Limbo survival. That said, once you do have those, this technique loses almost all of its use, as it's just faster and simpler to swap to a melee and maul things to death while healing up off of them. Oh, and yes, while I can't show this very well in the video because I find Rafflecopter builds downright boring and actually sold all of my whips, you can slide attack out of the void, so if you've got Maiming Strike and Stupid Range, you could probably combine this technique with that to create something of a death ball. But again, at that point, you're probably already geared, so why wouldn't you be just killing everything everywhere? Next, you can turn your Cataclysm into a kill zone. Again, this is basically just something to use when not geared, or maybe when working with another Limbo, and it's at its best when used against melee enemies, but it is a pretty fun setup and can be useful before you get your full gear. By placing a Cataclysm down that does not have stasis, and then luring enemies into it while staying in the void and outside of the cataclysm, you can keep melee enemies from ever being able to reach you and force all other damage sources to only come from one specific area. As long as you keep circling around the zone, enemies should keep coming in, and you can just dance around the cataclysm picking them off at your leisure. But as I said, this stops being useful once you get some mods set up, so once you've got some durability, you're just better off diving right on into the horde. Oh, and one final thing about Cataclysm. Since you can use it at long range, you can just drop it on distant enemies and or areas that you either want to safely clear or just don't want to mess with. This isn't a very useful trick at any point, and the only thing I'd really suggest using it for is getting rid of turrets at a long distance if you don't have a good ranged weapon, or simply replacing shields on objectives, but it does have its uses, so it should be mentioned. Now let's cover some enemy interactions I missed, and we'll start off with the Juggernaut. These guys are basically identical to the Kuva Guardians. They can be banished, but it does not last long, and while they can move and fire under stasis, they cannot actually hit anything until stasis wears off. Oh, and yes, just like with the Kuva Guardians, you can Zaworld yourself with these guys, so watch out. Next up, Grineer Turrets. They work basically like bursts. You can banish and stasis them from the front, then step into the void and get behind them, then cut the dude off the back. Pretty simple, and I'm sure most of you figured out you could do this from what I said in the last video, but I thought I'd go ahead and mention this just in case. Now let's talk about those annoying flyers in the plains. Yes, it's tricky, especially if you're using a short range build, but you can banish and stasis them. After that, if you want, you can just shoot the guy off the back and hop aboard. But there's a couple of things to keep in mind. First, Dargians are kind of awful. They do no damage, and why aren't you just using your Arcwing? Second, it's possible to banish the pilot and not the Dargian, particularly when they are just taking off, which will not stop the machine or its gunfire at all. Now let's talk about the turrets in the Kuva Fortress, which, while you can banish, they can get bugged, so you need to be careful. You see, these guys start to disappear after a set amount of time, and when they do, they turn invincible. That's already kind of annoying, but if the banish wears off, there is a glitch that can occur where they keep that banished state forever, at least until killed. This isn't a major issue, and just means you need to handle them yourself, but it can be annoying and is probably worth mentioning. Before I forget, there's actually an ally who has a very important banished interaction that you should be aware of. Eidolon Lures. You see, they can still absorb the little guys and capture the Eidolon just fine while banished. So if you are comfortable in your ability to play Limbo, you can take him into the plains and never lose lure, even if your team has no way to heal them. Finally, I'm going to end this video on a whole slew of NPCs who can be banished in a wonderful way. Every single thing in the index. You see, like Sentience, they receive a short banish duration, but still receive the full effects of Stasis and Cataclysm. So if you've got a few friends who want to make ridiculous amounts of money with you, just go to the index, set up a large, long-duration Stasis Cataclysm, and melee everything to death. Keep in mind that this works far better on the indoor map, and that you should probably let your teammates pick up tokens instead of you. But yeah, this strategy works without issues right up until the point where your melee weapons stop being able to kill anything. So while I strongly suggest not doing this in a pug, because some people actually enjoy playing the game, if you do want to cheese the index with some friends, this is a very, very solid way to do it. Anyways, I hope you've learned something from this video. If you have, please leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you later. Farewell.